All right. So the Torah portion for the Shabbat is Baha'alotcha, and it's a very full Torah portion. It's got a lot of sections to it. It begins on 8:16 in our Eitz Chaim Chumash, where the heading is Final Preparations for the Use of the Tabernacle. It opens up with the word Baha'alotcha. God speaks to Moses. It says, speak to Aaron, Daber al Aharon v'amarti el Baha'alotcha et haneirot el mul pnei hamenorah ya'iru shivat haneirot. So there's a little section, it's really just a short paragraph, that Aaron needs to light the tabernacle menorah every day, and there are 7 lamps, 3 and 3 and 1 in the middle, and we know the shape, it's famous, and all of the side lamps, the 6 side lamps, tilt toward the center, which is a higher lamp than the rest of them, is the focus of all of the other lights, and they're all lit every day. And the menorah is also described as being solid, one piece of gold that has been sculpted to be, beautifully ornamented with natural imagery of flower buds and branches. So it has an image sort of like a tree, which is lit up. In the past, I've mentioned that this is a little bit of a kind of a recollection of the burning bush, except the burning bush was a thorn bush, and here we have a tree, with beautiful, luxuriant vegetation that is lit up every day. So that's the priest's job. Then we go into a whole thing about the Levites. I wrote a little bit about the Levites also in this week's Torah Sparks. They're given their literally their marching orders and their assignments. They are nitunim. They are placed. They are assigned to help out in the temple and to help the children of Israel protect the temple and treat the temple with respect. So that's all a section in the Torah reading. Then we have the fascinating section of we're a year after the Exodus, and the holiday of Pesach happens for the first time as a holiday, right? When the Exodus happened, the Passover holiday was actually a real live experience of getting out of Egypt. So we had this special sacrificial meal while we were waiting, anxiously for God to pass over our houses and do the final plague so that we would finally be led out of Egypt. That was the first Passover. The second year, this is where we are now, is the first time Passover is being observed as a remembrance, as something that is an anniversary. We were talking about anniversaries before. So this is the first anniversary of the Exodus, the first time that the Jewish people are celebrating Passover as a symbolic celebration rather than as real-time history. So it's very important. Everybody's very excited, except that there are some people who, by the rules of the Torah that were already laid out in Egypt, will not be able to celebrate the Passover because they're ritually impure. They've come in contact with the dead. And the rabbis imagined that this could have been actually the people that were carrying Joseph's bones. Remember that Joseph had to be rescued from Egypt. He made the brothers promise before he died, when you leave, you got to take me along. So, that was hundreds of years before. He, of course, was just, a skeleton remains in some kind of casket, and Moses pays attention to make sure that they don't forget about it. And he is taken out of Egypt. So the rabbis imagined that people that were dealing with that became ritually impure. So on the one hand, they're doing this wonderful mitzvah. On the other hand, they now come to Moses and they say, why should we be left out from this national celebration? The entire Jewish people is going to come as one people to mark the first anniversary of our birth as a people. And we're not going to be able to celebrate? So Moses goes, wait, let me see what God has to say. And God says, great point. Excellent. We'll have to do something about it. And what God does is, anybody remember? God creates a new holiday. God creates the holiday of Pesach Sheni. In other words, God doesn't change the rules for observing Passover. So if you are ritually impure, you're not allowed to eat the Paschal lamb. Of course, this has nothing to do with the way we celebrate Passover today, because we don't have a temple. It's not a sacrifice that we eat, and so on and so forth. But when the Paschal lamb, the lamb that you ate as the Passover sacrifice was a sacrifice, you had to be ritually pure to eat it. So what about all the people that couldn't eat it? So God says there'll be a second Passover, Pesach Sheni, 1 month to the day. 1 month later, instead of in the month of Nisan, in the month of Iyar, people will be able to celebrate, instead of a 7-day holiday, a 1-day holiday, because for the people who are ritually impure, they can celebrate the rest of the 7 days. They can eat matzah and maror. They can do all the stuff that everybody does for treat, right? Okay, Jen is very excited that everybody can eat maror. But it's
sorry, my dad was pointing out a cat in a box. I left a box on the table, and now it's occupied by one of my cats, with the other one eyeing it.
You sure it's not a squirrel?
Not a squirrel.
Not a squirrel. Okay, so therefore God creates this new holiday at the behest of people who say, give us a chance to celebrate Judaism. Give us a chance to be part of the Jewish people. And God can't say no. So God creates more Torah that apparently was waiting until this point. It hadn't been codified. So it's a very exciting idea that this piece of Torah comes up by popular demand, literally. Yeah, Jen.
Do we do anything for this? I've seen, like, I saw it online this year and I didn't know what it was and what was going on.
Nothing much to do. Like I said, there's nothing much to do because officially what it is you're supposed to get the lamb and sacrifices.
Do you eat more matzah or something? Because I feel like a lot of
some
Orthodox
people
are eating
today
matzah.
have tried to recapture it, and for many people, it's become this kind of message of the meaningful idea of a second chance. That this is about giving people a second chance. So without quibbling about the whole thing, that's a beautiful idea. So it's been a little bit rediscovered in recent times. There's not a whole bunch. I mean, the whole bunch of it is that in the morning and afternoon prayers, you don't say Tachnun, right? So that's the way for thousands of years we celebrated Pesach Sheni. If it wasn't that, so we left out some of the sad prayers. But other than that, there was really nothing significant about it. But nowadays, people are sort of like waking up and going, "Ooh, that's an interesting kind of message. Let's run with it." Audrey.
Is that holiday come at the end or the beginning?
Of what?
Passover.
It comes a month after the first night of Passover.
A month.
A month after, because it's to give people time to get ritually pure.
I see. Interesting.
Okay.
So
it happens a month later. The night, again, a month after that, eating the Paschal lamb, which they couldn't do. So a month later, they do it. And let's just also pay attention to the fact that means it's not an anniversary. It's no longer what we make a big deal about on Passover is tonight, we're reliving, we're coming out of Egypt and so on, which is all very, is significant and moving. What they're doing is something else. What they're doing is celebrating that God doesn't want to leave them behind, that God doesn't want to leave them out. That's what they're celebrating, right? And of course, it's connected to the idea of the redemption of the children of Israel, that God says, I'm getting all of you out. If you want to get out, you're getting out. So, so that's a fascinating section in the Torah reading. Then we have a very beautiful passage that goes for a whole bunch of verses that talks about that as the children of Israel would travel in the desert, which is what we're just about to get doing, they would follow wherever the cloud of glory took them. And the cloud of glory was this moving manifestation of God. And if the cloud got up, the people of Israel got up and got ready to go. And, then, you had 14 seconds to pack, and then the cloud would start moving and everybody would move according to the way that the Torah told every tribe where they had to line up. Everybody had assigned, places in the procession. And then whenever the cloud, they would watch the cloud keep going, and wherever the cloud then lowered down and plunked itself down on a spot in the middle of the wilderness, that's where they would stop, and that's where they would pitch camp. And everybody knew exactly which side they had to be, where the Mishkan had to be, and so on. So they were always camping and decamping and recamping, whatever the words are. They were always setting up camp, taking down camp. Sometimes for a little bit of time, sometimes they stayed there for a year or more, but they never knew how long they were going to be anywhere. And they would always be looking at this cloud that hovered over them to look for the signal. Are we moving on or are we staying? So it's a very beautiful, there's a kind of a chorus. Al pi Hashem yachanu vi al pi Hashem yisal. According to God's word, they would camp out. According to God's word, they would travel. It's repeated like 3 times. Anyway, then we keep going, and then we have a kind of a more prosaic idea, which is that when that signal from God happened, we had an earthly signal. We had trumpets, chatzotzrot, not shofar, trumpets, silver trumpets that were blown to muster everybody to their positions and get everybody going. So this was part of this kind of like honor guard, semi-military kind of thing, the kinds of things that we see a lot, like in palaces and, and stuff like that. So that happened as well in the desert. And God says that you should do this also if you ever have to go to war. Muster all the troops with these chatzotrot, with these silver trumpets. And then we moved. So that becomes Vayi b'shana hashenit b'chodesh hasheni, esrim b'chodesh. On the second year after leaving Egypt, so a year has already passed. In the second month, we left Egypt in the first month. So it's the second month on the 20th of the month. So it's a year and 5 days after leaving Egypt that the cloud lifted and we started marching. And everybody starts marching. Is a description of every tribe and which, where they are online and so on and so forth. It's a very cinematic idea. You can imagine like, Cecil B. DeMille filming, the throngs and throngs of people with all their colors and so on, moving on. And then we have again another little vignette. Moses asks his father-in-law, why don't you come with us? So we have this idea that apparently he's called Chovav here, also Yitro. And Moses says, hey, you came, we had it before, remember, that he brings his family back for reunification with Moses. They come together. This is the Parsha Torah portion in Exodus of Yitro coming to visit and restore Moses to his family. And apparently they've been there for almost a year. And now we're ready to go. And Moses says, so come along, come with us. You can be a guide for us. And Yitro says, thanks very much, but no thanks. So then we have 2 verses that we put into our Torah's service. Right. So when the ark actually started off on its path, Moses would proclaim this verse. So we do that when we open the ark to take the Torah out for the Torah service. And then the next verse says, and when the ark rested, and everybody knew that it was time to stop traveling, and when it sat down, Moses would say, Shuv Hashem, etc. Rest, God, sit down, take a breather, those two verses became part of our Torah service, and they are set off in the Torah with a special mark. There are different traditions about how to do it, but a special backwards nun, like a parentheses, is used to set off these two verses from the rest of the Torah. Very unique. It's the only place that this happens. Anyway, then we have another little thing, and that is that the children of Israel start kvetching. Right? What are you gonna do? So they start saying, what do we have to eat? I'm hungry. When do we stop? Now that they, stopped all the Howard Johnsons from being on the road, what exactly are we going to enjoy? All we have is this man, that's it. And so then God gives them quail for a month, and they get sick from eating so much meat. And some of them actually die because God says, beware of what you wish for. You didn't like the man, you wanted something heavier, you wanted meat. I'm going to give you meat till it starts, coming out from between your teeth. And that's what happens. Then Moses says to God, I can't take it. This people is just too much for me. It's too heavy for me to carry this people. Like I'm supposed to carry this people like a nursemaid carries the little baby in her arms. I can't do it. So what does God say? God says, get 70 elders and they will be your helpers. There'll be a council of 70 people. And this is like the early model of what later became the Sanhedrin. And therefore it won't only be on you. It'll be, you'll be able to delegate authority. So this is a repeat. We've had this before. And in fact, Yitro was one of the people who advises Moses. He doesn't give him a number. He says, just spread out the judging duties to as many people as you can. Here, God says, how many people here? It's a couple of people here, a whole bunch, half of you are on the board. So this is a giveaway next week. This is like the Torah, basic text for creating a board of trustees for a shul, right? So there's a whole bunch of people that are given responsibility to run the community. So that's that part. And then finally, we have the ending of the Torah reading we've discussed when we used to do back in the good old days, when we used to get together on early Shabbat morning, the story of Miriam and Aaron coming together and kvetching not about the manna, not about the food, but about Moses. Who does Moses think he is? God gets very angry. Miriam is stricken with tzara'at. Moses prays for her recovery, the short 5-word prayer that we have for healing. Hail, na, rafah, na, la. Please, 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 God, just send her healing. And the children of Israel wait for Miriam. She has to be sent out of the camp because she has tzara'at. She's ritually impure to a severe degree. And the children of Israel wait until Miriam is healed. And as I pointed out back in the day, this is the flip of what we had earlier in the Torah reading. Earlier in the Torah reading, it says that the children of Israel traveled according to whatever God said. If the cloud got up, we get up. If the cloud sits down, we sit down. Cloud moves, we move. Cloud stops, we stop. But here the Torah says specifically that the children of Israel waited for Miriam. So the implication being that the cloud says, come on, it's time to go. And the people are going, I'm sorry, we're not going because Miriam has to come with us. And she's still outside the camp. So we're going to wait for her. So there's a kind of, again, a dialoguing back and forth between what comes out from God and what comes out of the desires and the commitments of the people of Israel, just like that Pesach Sheni section earlier, right? that God responds to the deep passion of the Jewish people to be part of this whole, literally this journey. So that's the end of the Torah reading. So very, very rich. A lot of Torah reading, so much so that it took away half our time to talk about the Haftarah. So now we're going to look at the Haftarah. And this is from the prophet Zechariah in the Eitz Chaim Chumash. It's on 837. And it's from the end of chapter 2 of Zechariah, and then going through all of chapter 3, and then into chapter 4. Zechariah was a prophet from the restoration of the Second Commonwealth. So this is dated apparently from a little bit earlier in chapter 2. This is from about 520 BCE. The first temple was destroyed in 586. About 50 years afterwards, in the 530s, Cyrus gives the children of Israel, the Jews, permission to go back. It's a slow process, but now this is about 20 years later. There are 3 prophets that are speaking to the Jews because they're living in Judea. They're the Jews in their restored homeland, the people that had the guts or the faith or the desperation or the adventurousness to come back from Babylonia and come back into the land of Israel and to rebuild the temple. So they are rebuilding the temple as we speak. The second temple is being established. Okay, so now let's see what Zechariah says. And of course, our $1 million question is, what's the connection to our Torah reading?
How
Okay.
long did the second temple exist?
It existed, again, it's a long process of its being built. So for instance, in about 450, this is 520. 70 years later, they're still building it. They're still getting things ready. Ezra and Nehemiah is about 450. But so let's say 500 years BCE, right? And then it's destroyed in 70 CE.
Okay.
So it's a little, it's a little less than 600 years.
Okay.
Okay. So who's going to read for us today? Going once, going twice. Come on.
I'll do it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Shout for joy, fair Zion, for lo, I come and I will dwell in your midst, declares the Lord. In that day, many nations will attach themselves to the Lord and become his people, and he will dwell in your midst. Then you will know that I was sent to you by the Lord of hosts. The Lord will take Judah to himself as his portion of the Holy Land, and he
In the Holy Land. In the Holy Land.
And he will choose Jerusalem once more. Be silent, all flesh, before the Lord, for he is roused from his holy habitation.
Okay, so there's this kind of exclamation points, a lot of excitement. This is shout for joy. This is the good news, to coin a phrase, right? That everything is going to be great. This restoration of the Jewish people to their homeland is going to be amazing without, being stopped. There at this, a lot of neighboring peoples are trying to stop this from happening. They don't want this immigration coming in of all these Jews from Babylonia. They don't want an independent or quasi-independent state to be established in Judea. So there's a lot of obstacles, and Zechariah says, no, don't be deterred. It's all God's plan. This is it. Believe me, I am God's messenger, and God is very excited. And the people who are against you, eventually they're going to be coming to your side, and they're going to support you. God wants the Jewish people to be in their land. Okay.
He further showed me Joshua, the high priest, standing before the angel of the Lord, and the accuser standing at his right to accuse him.
The word accuser in Hebrew, Satan, Satan.
Oh. But the angel of the Lord said to the accuser, the Lord rebuke you, O accuser. May the Lord who has chosen Jerusalem rebuke you. for this is a brand plucked from the fire. Now Joshua was
So wait,
clothed-
so time out before we get to Joshua himself. So we get this court scene up in heaven, and God is apparently judging the Jewish people. And Satan, the accuser, the prosecuting attorney, is making the case against the Jewish people. They don't deserve to be, attended to. They don't deserve all this great news that Zechariah is reporting. You're so happy to have the Jews come back to the land of Israel. Get out of here. It's no good. It's a terrible idea. So that's the accuser is like trying to persuade God not to side with the Jewish people. And an angel of God shouts back at the accuser, at Satan, shame on you, get out of here. God, your objection. There's this courtroom drama with somebody who's the defense attorney for Israel, but also knows that the judge is prejudiced. The judge really wants the people of Israel, the Jewish people, to be exonerated and restored. Okay.
Now Joshua was clothed in filthy garments when
Who's
he
Joshua? Not Joshua, Moses and Joshua.
No,
This is Joshua who lives at the time of Zechariah. He is the high priest.
okay.
So this is Yehoshua Kohen Gadol, right? So this is a guy living in the 6th century BCE, and he is of priestly lineage, and he has been given the job of, in this new temple that's being built with this, the altar is the first thing to be built. He is given the job to be the presiding priest to make sure that all the sacrifices will start up all over again. So Joshua is clothed in filthy garments. Okay, so what do you think that would signify? What kind of image is that the prophet Zechariah has before him? What would it mean to imagine the high priest of Israel in filthy garments? Remember, we learned already many weeks back again and again how the high priest has a terrifically beautiful, impressive costume. Here, he's in bigadim tsoim, which means filthy garments, and filth even in the sense of excrement. Right. So what would that convey for us? Yeah, Audrey.
Well, it almost feels like a psychological breakdown.
Okay, so you want to make it very internal. Okay.
Yeah.
Psychological breakdown of who?
Joshua. I mean, why would a priest of this, the great priest, be so filthy?
Okay. Any suggestions, David?
I think he might be a working man. I think he's conducting sacrifices, which are a bloody mess. Are there sacrifices during the rebuilding? I don't know.
No, they've done sacrifices, but I would say that although there's blood sprinkled on the and so on,
An excrement.
you would never imagine that the high priest's uniform would be described as covered with excrement and filth. That's not what you would think. What this is saying is, why would a high priest be dressed like that way? Because he's not the high priest. Because remember, this is new. Because this is exactly what's at stake here. The accuser is saying, don't let this happen. Don't let the restoration of the Jewish people happen. So Joshua, the high priest, has been a refugee. Joshua, the high priest, has been an exile. Joshua, the high priest, has been treated by the Babylonians and by the Persians as a piece of garbage.
Interesting.
Right. So why does he look like that? Because maybe he was once upon a time the high priest, or maybe he should be the high priest. But right now, he's just a filthy Jew. He's just a Jew who's been subject to a lot of trouble. So that's, because this is first, before we get into any feelings about it, it's an external symbolic degradation. The man has been degraded. Now, let's see what the prophet does with it.
Do I start with verse 4?
Yeah,
The latter spoke up and said to his attendants,
this is the angel, God's angel.
take the filthy garments off him. And he said to him, see, I have removed your guilt from you, and you shall be clothed in priestly robes.
So now it becomes absolutely clear. The filthy garments are not priestly garments. The filthy garments are anti-priestly garments. And they also represent spiritual degradation. And the accuser has been accusing the people of Israel all this time of not being worthy. You know, why should we think that the children of Israel, that the Israelites, the Jews, all of a sudden are the most wonderful people in the entire world? We have never been the most wonderful people in the entire world, right? First suggestion by me of the connection with our Torah reading. What do we have in the Torah reading this week in B'Halotcha? We've got this amazing, wonderful, encounter with God. God is taking care of us, giving us everything we need. And what do? We complain. We complain. It's not good enough. We want meat. Where's our pastrami sandwich? Why do we want bread from heaven when we can have, some deli? It's not very nicely reflective. We have some very passionately devoted Jews. They create Pesach Sheni. And we have a whole mass of Jews who couldn't care less, who don't value what's been given to them as Jews. So the accuser is focusing on the glass that's half empty or 1/10 empty, whatever it is, or 9/10 empty. And the angel is saying, no, this is redemption time. We're washing away the filth. This man is meant to be the high priest, and we're putting on the garments for him to become the high priest and function the way he should. Go ahead. I've removed your guilt from you. Okay, you're innocent. Okay, good. 5.
Then he gave the order. Let a pure diadem,
Diadem. That means a crown.
okay, be placed on his head. And they placed the pure diadem on his head and clothed him in priestly garments as the angel of the Lord stood by.
Right. So pure here means not pure gold, but pure, ritually pure. Right. This man is instead of being filthy and befouled, he's now restored to the high priesthood, and he's wearing pure garments, ritually pure garments. He is exactly what a high priest has to be. Okay. So do we have another connection to the Torah reading? How many people vote yes? Okay, 1.
But it might not
How
be,
many?
I might be wrong.
Always. That's how we go through life. That should be our motto. I'm doing this, but might be wrong.
Might be wrong.
Right. But I would suggest that's part of what we have here. The people, again, that second Pesach section was all about being pure or impure. This is a ritual purification in prophetic vision of this man who the Jewish people need him. Without this, we can't do the sacrifices. If the ritual impurity continues, nothing can happen, to restore our service to God. So he's being restored, right? And it comes through this external imagery of the garments and the crown. It's a special kind of crown. It's the crown that the high priest would wear. It was kind of a band across his head, and it said Kodesh Lashem, holy, dedicated to God. Okay.
And the angel of the Lord charged Joshua as follows. Thus said the Lord of hosts, if you walk in my paths and keep my charge, you in turn will rule my house and guard my courts, and I will permit you to move about among these attendants. Hearken well, O high priest Joshua, you and your fellow priests sitting before you. For those men are a sign that I am going to bring my servant, the branch. For mark well this stone which I place before Joshua, a single stone with 7 eyes. I will execute its engraving, declares the Lord of hosts, and I will remove this country's guilt in a single day. In that day, declares the Lord of hosts, you will be inviting each other to the shade of vines and fig trees.
Okay, so the shade of vines and fig trees, El Ish L'Re'ehu El Tachat Gefen Ve'el Tachat Te'ina. This echoes what happened hundreds of years before, when Isaiah had his vision of what will happen in the end of days, when peace will come, when the Messiah will come, and everybody will feel good. The little child, will be the leader, and the innocents, right? The wild animals will lie down with the squirrels. Everything will be fine. And each person will be under their fig tree and under their date tree, and everything will be fine, right? So that's an echo. Hundreds of years later, that phrase is now being repeated by Zechariah as a prophetic prediction that this is the time of redemption. Who would have thunk 70 years before we were defeated, we were exiled, our temple was in ruins, everything was smashed to pieces. 70 years later, here we are, we're back in our homeland and we're building a temple. Unbelievable. So this is, glorious. But it's contingent, right? You have to keep the faith. If you walk in my paths, then this will happen. If you decide to throw it away, as the Jewish people have done again and again and again, it's not going to work out so great. So it's a big if. There's again, to point out another connection, another thread that goes into our Torah reading. And that's the image of guard my courts. That's in verse 7, right? Begam tishmor et chatzerai. Guarding the courts means guarding the Mishkan, guarding the tabernacle. Now the tabernacle has been turned into a building, a shrine, and it has to be guarded. The holiness of this space has to be protected. It has to be cherished. People have to care for it. You can't just trample it. You can't just treat it like some kind of casual thing. The Levites were established in our Torah reading as special guardians for the Mishkan all around. They are positioned all around to make sure that the holy precinct that is the Mishkan is not trespassed on, is not treated improperly, ritual impurity does not get into it, and so on. So there's that idea. This is what you will need to do to guard your own life, your own commitment, and also guard the symbol of that commitment, which is God's court in the shrine. And then there's this really interesting phrase. In the English, it says, if you do all this is verse 7, I will permit you to move about among these attendants. Which attendants? So the angel is talking, the angel is talking to Joshua. It says, if you're a good boy, I'm going to let you move around among these attendants. Which attendants? Who are they?
The other angels.
Right. So we have this image that if you, human being, can get your act together, then you will be able to mingle with the angels. You'll be able to just be there in this heavenly kingdom. So that's the promise. In the Hebrew, the image is sharpened up a little bit. The Hebrew says, "V'natati lecha," Malchim bein ha'omdim ha'eleh. Malchim is walkers, from the word halach, right? To walk around. I will give you permission to walk around, right, among those who stand here. So the attendant is a person who's stationed at a particular security point, or a particular, what are those guards at what's the palace?
Buckingham Palace.
Buckingham Palace.
That's
right?
exactly what came to my mind.
So,
Yeah.
right. So, and think about those guys. They're supposed to. It's like famous, I think, right? That they're not supposed to move. They're not supposed to flinch. They can't go to the bathroom. They're not supposed to smile. People go over there and they taunt them, and they try to get them to break, and they're just supposed to stand there. So that's the word here, omdim. They stand at attention, at their post. But you, says God, you will be given the right to move around, to walk around among these people who are stuck in their place. You will have the freedom to just walk from here to there while they're in their spot. So that image is an image of kind of privilege, an image of freedom, as I say. But in the Hasidic tradition, this verse is very important because this verse was used as the basis for understanding what's the difference between the best human being and an angel. Do we aspire to be like the angels? And the Hasidic masters said, we don't aspire to be like the angels. We're better than the angels. The best angel can only do what God tells the angel to do. If God says, this is your job, then you stand in that job. You don't move. Your job is go tell Abraham that he's going to have a child. So even though you're moving, there's movement, but you don't do anything beyond your mission. So you are static in your identity. And the message is, we are not static. We move. We can grow. We can go from here to there. We can take a journey and we can discover things and we can change. The way Abraham, what's the whole story of our founding as a family that became a nation? Get moving, lech lecha, become a blessing by moving along. So it doesn't just mean obviously literal locomotion. It means move along, try to encounter things, try to challenge yourself, try to grow a little bit, try to be more. You can be more, so try to do that. Angels can't be more. Angels can only be what they are because that's the definition of what an angel is. An angel is a force created for a specific purpose. A wind can't be a tree. A tree can't be a squirrel. A squirrel can't be, a prophet. But human beings can encompass anything and everything. So that phrase, that's from that little phrase that could get lost in the whole thing, is a foundational phrase within Jewish spiritual teaching. Right? Be a walker. Don't be a stick in the mud. Okay. So then we have this imagery again of the reestablishing of a building, right? Kind of having a cornerstone or a capstone that is, set up, and it's got 7 eyes. Any connections to our Torah reading? How many people say yes? Good. You're right. Of course there's a connection to our Torah reading. Otherwise it wouldn't be here. What connection, David, what connection do you see? You're on mute, I think.
At the very beginning of the parsha, there's reference to 7 lamps.
Right? The menorah, right? The menorah is 7 branches, 7 lights that give light out into the space, right? Let's see how this then gets played out as we go into the last section.
Okay. The angel who talked with me came back and woke me as a man is wakened from sleep. He said to me, "What do you see?" And I answered, "I am a lampstand.
I see.
I see a lampstand, all of gold with a bowl above it. The lamps are on it. The lamps on it are 7 in number, and the lamps above it have 7 pipes. And by it are 2 olive trees, one on the right of the bowl and one on its left. I in turn asked the angel who talked with me, "What do those things mean, my Lord?" "Do you not know what those things mean?" asked the angel who talked with me. And I said, "No, my Lord." Then he explained to me as follows. This is the word of the Lord to
To Zerubbabel.
All right.
Zerubbabel was the governor who was the secular political leader, military leader, side by side with Joshua. Right, so these were the 2 people who were leading the return of the children of Israel, the return of the Jews.
And he was a Jewish leader, army leader.
Right.
Okay.
And he was appointed governor by Darius, by the Persian emperor, to lead whatever Jews were coming back to Israel. He was in charge of ruling them. Right? He was the governor. So this is the word of God.
Not by might, not by power, but by my spirit, said the Lord of hosts. Whoever you are, O great mountain in the path of Zerubbabel, turn into level ground, for he shall produce that excellent stone. It shall be greeted with shouts of beautiful, beautiful.
And that's the end of the Haftarah. Right? That's what it is. So we get the spiritual vision of the menorah, which is, the symbol. It is the symbol of the Jewish people, not the Magen David, not the Star of David. Right? The menorah is the oldest and most central image of Judaism. And here we have that restorative image, right? That the menorah will shine again. Right? The menorah represents the entire shrine. It represents the rebuilding of the temple, and it's the rebuilding of the Jewish people. And we will all be this shining, beam of light, like Isaiah once said, to be light to the nations. Right? We will be a menorah out into the world if we do God's bidding. Right? And how do we make sense of, in the last couple of minutes that we have, what is this proclamation to Zerubbabel? Right? Lo bechayil velo bechoach, ki im beruchi. Right? Not by might, nor by power, but by my spirit. Right? Amar Hashem Tzvakot, says the eternal God of myriads, Lord of hosts. What do we think that short kind of message is supposed to be conveying? What did we say Zerubbabel's job was?
He's a military person.
Right. He's the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He's the Secretary of State and of the Minister of Defense and whatever other kind of titles you can give. He is the Commander-in-Chief. Right.
Well, it would be as if someone said to our Commander-in-Chief, not with all your armies, but by my spirit. But I'm not quite sure. And therefore, and then.
In other words, and then everything will be amazing. Then all the obstacles will be leveled, and you will be able to raise up that stone that becomes the capstone of my sacred house. And as it's being raised, everybody's going, "Oh, unbelievable, beautiful, beautiful." There'll be cries and shouts of "Yay, hooray, gorgeous." So that triumph will not be a triumph that's a military triumph. It's not going to be a triumph that's going to be attained by your own might. This echoes later on when Moses is giving his final, speeches in Devarim. He says, you're going to be tempted when you get into the land of Israel to think that this is all about your fighting. Right? You're going to say, I did this all with my own, strength. I'm the new Jew. Not that Jew that prays and goes to synagogue and keeps careful watch over what they're eating or whatever. No, the new Jew, tough, military, power. The world is not going to mess with us anymore. We're not going to be, wearing filthy clothes because we've been kicked around in the street by the Goyim. If they kick us, we'll kick them doubly hard. Right? This is the Zionist, reaction. So yes, they need to have Zerubbabel puts up guards against any attacks by you have to, of course you have to defend yourself, but defense is not the same thing as making the might the be all and end all. So this is a kind of a warning, right, to the military and secular and political leaders that you're supposed to be doing this in service of a spiritual vision. And that's what makes it worthwhile, and that's what makes it legitimate. And otherwise, forget it. So that we start our Torah reading with the menorah, and then we end up talking about mustering troops and so on and so forth. And our haftarah ends with the menorah, right? Ends with this vision that all of the material necessities that we have to deal with in real life, they're necessities for sure, but they're only necessary in order to make it possible for us to transcend and be even better than the angels. That's in the end. If we're going to walk through the wilderness, let's be walkers and not standers. Let's grow and not just be stuck in our concepts, be stuck in our set ideas about who we are and what we're supposed to be, against everybody else. So that's our haftarah. David.
I forget where in the liturgy this statement arises. Lo b'koach, lo b'chaya, lo b'koach. Seems to me
there's an echo of it. This exact phrase is only here. It's in the Haftorah. So it'll be recited in the liturgy on Shabbos. We have a similar message in a number of Psalms. So for instance, we say in the Psalms that after Ashrei, we say, Lo b'guras hasus yechpatz. God doesn't want the might of the horses. Right? God's not interested in the lo b'shokei ha'ish yirtzeh. Right? God doesn't want big, powerful muscles on a man, and doesn't want us to just have, the chariots and the cavalry, right? Rather, what God wants is to be God-fearing. So we have that in a number of Psalms. We have it at the end of in Lamanatseach, right before we say Uva L'Tzion at the end of the davening on a daily basis. We say it there as well. So it's found in the liturgy in similar formulations, but not exactly these words.
But the message is that the physical, the might and the beauty, to keep your eye on the ball instead. It's to the ball is the Spirit of God.
The Spirit of God, righteousness, love, justice, those kinds of things. That's what everything is supposed to be serving. Okay. Yesher koach, everybody.
Thank you.
So this is really weird. I don't know how they.
Rabbi, are we meeting next Thursday?
We're going to meet next Thursday for the last time.
Okay.
Okay. I look forward to it.